Hey guys, I want to talk a little bit about how living my life online was making me a very angry person. So in this video, I'm going to share a bit about my personal experience, what got me thinking about this topic, and then a few reasons why being chronically online like I was can contribute to being very angry without necessarily even realizing it, which I didn't until I recently stopped using social media, switched to a flip phone, and started to really reassess how I use the internet. So just so we know we're all talking about the same thing, I'm going to share the definition of anger, which is from the Cambridge Dictionary. Anger is a strong feeling that makes you want to hurt someone or be unpleasant because of something unfair or unkind that has happened. So very broad when we think about the internet and the number of things that one can be exposed to in a very short amount of time that, I don't mean to use this word too flippantly, but that kind of trigger that feeling of anger in yourself is very high, or at least it was for me. So in my personal experience, I became more angry the more time I spent online, and the ways that showed up for me are, I've made a little list, so I'm referring to it here if you see me looking off camera. The first thing was that, as I said, because I'm exposing myself to more people, opinions, I am experiencing more anger. And I think that's just a case of, the more time you spend exposing yourself to things, the more likely that are outside of your control, the more likely you are to experience an outcome, right? And for me, more often than not, that was anger. So, I would use the internet to connect to people. I would use the internet to feel seen and heard. And in part that did happen. But more often than not, that feeling or that connection was clouded by seeing something that I disagreed with, or that made me feel like, it was unfair or unkind or didn't align with my own moral compass. And that would make me feel angry. And so I would spend an awful lot of my time feeling and being dysregulated. I spend a lot of my time being dysregulated anyway, because I am neurodivergent. And I think that because of that, I didn't realize quite how much the internet and my constant being online was contributing to an even more elevated feeling of dysregulation on a day-to-day basis. And it's only since I've cut ties with things like my smartphone, social media, and I'm still using the internet, but it's in a very much more rule-based, constrained way, that I have noticed how much more regulated I am. And even when I'm dysregulated, I can regulate my nervous system more quickly than before, because before, when I felt dysregulated, I would go online on social media and I would think that my brain was switching off, but actually what was happening is that I was subconsciously consuming all of this information that was making me feel overloaded because of the quantity, and it was also making me feel angry and a huge other plethora of emotions that only added to a dysregulated nervous system. And with emotions, you need to process them, right? Or at least that's what I'm learning. I spent all my life not processing my emotions. I was just suppressing them. And so now I'm learning to process them. I was realizing that I had all this anger to process. And there is a lot of anger that I have to process that is from my life outside of the internet. But I think that there is also a lot of anger that comes from exposing to myself to information on the internet that goes unprocessed, because I didn't realize that it was coming from all of the information that I was receiving from the internet. And so I'm not a scientist, but I feel as though that anger was kind of getting stuck in my system. And because I wasn't processing it, it just wasn't doing me any good. And it's impossible to process something you don't know is there, right? I think the fact that I was on social media and on the internet experiencing this anger and this rage at some of the stuff that I was seeing online, but I wasn't moving my body or talking to anyone about it or expressing it and processing it in some way, I was just sitting there getting more and more addicted and more, you know, into the spiral. I just feel like that's a way to get anger stuck in the body, which I have read is not great for your health. And it certainly didn't feel good. And I know that there is a counter argument here that is, you know, it's important to be connected with, for example, social justice issues. And I don't disagree. I really don't disagree. But I think that when it comes to social media in particular, the addictive element of it is dangerous, because if you're becoming addicted to consuming content that is creating rage and anger in you, it's not, well, for me personally, it's not a space from which I can make focused, intentional actions to make change in the world. It's a place from which I stew and I spend my time consuming rather than analysing and thinking deeply and taking action on things that I personally can control and impact in the world. And I have experienced, since reducing the amount of time that I spend online, increasing the amount of time that I spend doing things like reading books. And I have learned so much more about those important social issues from those books than I have from being online, because I've been able to be more focused, because my attention isn't distracted, and I have been less overwhelmed and triggered emotionally by the quantity of information that's coming at me from social media and the internet. And there was a time when I was telling myself, no, I have to be online on social media, and to be able to be a part of those discussions and to make change in the world and to listen to everyone's opinions. And I actually think that was an excuse. I think that was an excuse because I was addicted to it. And in any event, even if that isn't the correct reading, I genuinely feel as though the anger that I felt outweighed the benefit of being connected to that much information. It stopped me from being able to like intellectually and kind of intentionally engage with topics that I care about and that I want to see changed in this world. So those were my personal reflections, and because I'm super interested in this topic, I kind of did a bit of reading around why being online can encourage anger online, and I found the irony, and I found a couple of interesting points that I had considered them, I guess, but they're not, you know, my original thoughts. The first one is that on social media, anger is rewarded over, you know, positive content. So the thing that got me thinking about this topic is this book, which if you watch my videos, you know I have been talking about a lot lately. It's Digital Minimalism on Living Better with Less Technology by Cal Newport, and I thoroughly recommend it. There is one paragraph that says, as demonstrated during the 2016 presidential election and its aftermath, online discussion seems to accelerate people's shift towards emotionally charged and draining extremes. The techno-philosopher Jaron Lanier, sorry if I've butchered that pronunciation, convincingly argues that the primacy of anger and outrage online is in some sense an unavoidable feature of the medium. In an open marketplace for attention, darker emotions attract more eyeballs than positive and constructive thoughts. For heavy internet users, repeated interaction with this darkness can become a source of draining negativity, a steep price that many don't even realize they're paying to support their compulsive connectivity. Not only does that mean that people who are creating content that incites, well, not incites, but that is negative, will be getting more likes and comments and shares on things that make people feel a negative emotion like anger. It also means that therefore there will be more content that is shown to people to make them angry. And so it's like this constant feedback loop. And I think over time, I lost perspective of how much anger I feel in a day and like what is quote unquote normal without the internet. Because after a while it becomes normal to feel that level of elevated emotion and kind of like triggered anger when you're living online that in day-to-day life without the internet you're not exposed to and you don't experience. And again, that comes back, as I've spoken to you before, about software companies and big tech wanting to addict you to social media because that's how they make money. So it's no surprise that our anger is used by these companies to, like, intentionally, but it's not something that I think many of us, or at least I, was particularly aware of. The next thing that I found was an idea published by Harvard Health Publishing about how essentially your physical and emotional separation from other people online contributes to feeling angry. And they give the example in the article of road rage. They say, to a large degree, the experience of road rage is universal and can be explained by the emotional distance that is created between drivers when there is both physical separation and a high potential for perceived slights and wrongdoing. The relative anonymity of driving leads to an exaggerated emotional response when feeling slighted or threatened, in part because all you may know of the other driver is that he or she just cut you off. It makes sense that you might react more angrily in that situation than if the same interaction occurred in another real life setting, i.e., I think by real life they mean sort of you're standing with that person, you know that person, etc. They go on to say, if you accept the premise that separation and relative anonymity increase the potential for rage, which makes total sense to me. For example, I am not a rageful person. I don't express rage in real life outside of the internet. But when you put me in a car, ask my husband, I can become rageful. So they say, if you accept the premise that separation and relative anonymity increase the potential for rage, imagine what the anonymity and dehumanization of the internet does to virtual interactions. It is well documented that online comment sections too often become a hub for threats, heated arguments, and name calling. And this just got me thinking about, like, how being online has become so normal for us and has become such a, like, integrated part of everyday life that I didn't think about how different it is to communication in real life, and how it's almost like, it's kind of like the Wild West. Sometimes I go online and I think I'm going to research one thing, and then I end up looking at something completely different that has caught my attention because it's divisive and it's making me feel angry, and therefore I'm, like, laser focused on it. And my ability to hold a nuanced position or to contextualize the information that I'm being given is hugely diminished because I don't have any of the context. It's this flat space online, and the people who've written that or made that video, they're almost like avatars. They're not real people, and of course we know they are real people, but I don't think that we think about that when we're consuming information online in the way that we would if we were having a real life conversation with someone in the physical world. So I just thought that was super interesting. And then the last point, which I've sort of touched on, is the point around information overload, and how if you are exposing yourself to a huge amount of information, then it's no wonder that you might feel irritable and angry. If I think about my own experience of, like, information overload, there is a point at which I recognize that I'm becoming overloaded when I am irritable and I snap and I feel angry, and I'm starting to express that in a way that doesn't feel like me. And no shame, because emotions are emotions, but I don't want to be contributing to that exposure to information without being intentional about it, because there is already so much in our world that overwhelms me, and so much in our world, so much information outside of the internet that there is to process and to feel overloaded by. You know, even, like, just daily decisions can be really, really overwhelming sometimes. And so this whole topic has just made me think about, actually, like, information overload is something that I intend to monitor more and be more aware of, because it can be the thing that tips me into feeling irritable and angry, which is not a pleasant feeling. And it's not something that it's not a place where I really feel creative or inspired or kind or open-minded or like myself or reasonable, rational, logical. It's when I'm fired up and I'm kind of, like, I'm over the edge already. So yeah, those are the kind of points the other points that I found online. I'm sure there's loads of others. I would love to hear what you guys think about this, and whether you have any other thoughts as to why being online can lead to us feeling so much anger, and also why we don't really necessarily notice it or think about it too much. I know lots of my videos are, about reassessing our lives, and how we interact with the internet, and in no way is any of it about preaching a right way to be. Like, I think we all have very different relationships with being online, and also I think that there are a lot of reasons, very valid reasons, why people need to be online more than other people. I don't think that there's any, well, personally, there's no moral judgment for it. I guess I'm just sharing these thoughts because I find it super interesting, and it's not something that I had ever really considered in depth before, outside of, oh yeah, I guess social media is kind of not good for me. Like, people say that, but I use it anyway. I just kind of never really thought about it in depth. If there's sort of even just one little seed that is sowed in someone else's mind from me sharing this, then I think that that's kind of cool, because whilst everyone's journey with the internet will be different, given it's so much part of our lives these days, I know that I personally have massively benefited mental health wise, physically, emotionally, from considering what the internet, how I integrate the internet into my life, for me personally, in my own life, that looks very different to anyone else's. I will probably write a separate essay on this topic on my Substack, which is also a place where you can support my channel and my writing if you are inclined to. I'll leave a link in the description box as always, and yeah, I look forward to hearing what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.